Thank you, Randy. Again, as Randy has said, my name is Doug Medley. I'm a Senior Application Engineer with CAD Desk Consulting Resources. Today's topic, as Randy said, is going to be based on the FDOT Survey EFB, or Electronic Field Book Design, Deliverables, and Civil 3D. And as he said, this is part 1 of 2. In May, we'll be doing part 2, which is going to be the FDOT Survey Casey Design Deliverables. And this webinar today is part of the Civil 3D State Kit webinar series provided by the FDOT. So what are we going to do today? Well, we're going to talk about EFB Desktop 3.2 and how we're going to use it to create LandXML files. We're going to take a look at the LandXML Visualizer tool, and we're going to look at the LandXML Grouper tool. Now, both the Visualizer and the Grouper tools are actually part of the FDOT State Toolkit. And then we're going to start up Civil 3D, and we're going to create a survey database, all right, go through some of the database setup functions that we have to take a look at. We're then going to import some LandXML data into that survey database. We're then going to create a SURVRD file and explain to why we use the SURVRD file. We're then going to edit, if required, some of the survey figures, and then we're going to look at point groups and possibly point display. And once we've gone through all that, then we're going to create 2 of the model files required for a survey deliverable, the TOPORD and the GDTMRD file. All right, the electronic field book, all right, version 3.2. So EFB3 Windows was developed by CAD Management for the department. It's supported by the Survey and Mapping Office in Tallahassee. Its development was done in 2007, and it basically went into production in 2012 and was designed just to mimic the DOS EFB as closely as possible. Now, when we talk about the electronic field book, we're talking more on the surveying side of things, of using this to basically connect up with your data collector and connect your survey data. What we're doing today is really working on the desktop version, and we're going to be working with the data that is being brought in from that collection out in the field. Okay, so the data that we're going to be looking at is the OBS files, the control files, possibly the XYZ files, and then we're going to create those, turn those into an XML file. So what is important about the desktop application, this EFB Desktop, is that the EFB Desktop will produce, and this is this area right down in here, will produce final process files that could be imported into Casey, GeoPack, and or Civil 3D. And the reason why we have to use this EFB Desktop is that the data that is created by EFB is not compatible directly into Civil 3D without going through a process and making it available to Civil 3D. And that's what we're going to do today on the EFB side. Now, if you don't have the EFB available to you on your desktop now, you can do a search under Google for EFB Desktop, download. It'll take you to a link. You will then download this EFB3.zip file, install it on your computer. If it doesn't want to start, I believe in the help file or the README file, it actually tells you about 1 or 2 files that you have to download from Microsoft. Once you do that, it should run fine. If you have any problems, just contact the central office, and they can help you get it up and going. Now, once it's installed on your desktop, you will have an icon. When you click on the icon, it opens up the EFB Desktop. Now, what we're concerned with is pretty much this file pull-down menu where we're going to create a new file, and then we're going to import data into this file, and then we're going to export the data out. So we're going to go through all those steps. All right. Once we've got that LandXML file created, we're going to open it up in the LandXML Visualizer tool, which again is part of your FDOT State Toolkit. It's found in the FDOT 2016.c3d desktop folder, and we're going to take a look at that LandXML data that we pushed out of EFB. Okay. Then we're going to take that LandXML file and we're going to run it through the LandXML grouper. Okay. All right. And we're going to talk in great detail about this. Again, this tool again is part of your state toolkit and found in your folder on your desktop. All right. Then we're going to start Civil 3D. Now, it's very important that when you start Civil 3D that you start it using the FDOT icon. You're either going to find a shortcut in your FDOT 2016.c3d folder on your desktop, or you may have an icon directly on your desktop. Either one will get Civility started correctly. Then when it's started, you should now have a new tab in your ribbon called FDOT. Okay. Now, today we are going to focus in on the Survey tab in the tool space in Civil 3D, because we're going to be working with Survey Database. So let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to do here is I'm going to give you just a quick overview of where I'm working at. So I have a project that ends in 11111. I'm going to go down to the Survey folder, and I have a folder that I've created called EFB. And in there, I've placed the data that I got from the surveying department, where they've gone out and they've collected 4 segments. All right, so I'm going to look at the segment that ends in B. All right, so these are the native files that we get from the electronic field book on the surveying side. And again, the problem is none of these files are directly compatible with Civil 3D. So we're going to have to use some of these files to create a LandXML file. And that's what we're going to use the EFB Desktop software for. So on my desktop, I'm going to double click on FDOT EFB to start the desktop. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out here and say File, New. And what I have to do is I have to create, all right, what's called an SDF file. All right, I'm going to go into the first segment folder that ends in the letter B, okay, and I'm going to create a file, and I'm going to call it 418.439b.sdf. All right. Now I just simply have an SDF file that's left over. That way I don't have to type in all those numbers for the presentation. All right, so I'm going to hit Save, and I'm going to overwrite the existing file. Okay. So now this SDF file, think of it as a container. It's just a place that we're going to pull data into. We're going to verify the data, and then we're going to push it out as a LandXML file. So let's go up here and say File and Import. Now we have 3 types of files that we can bring in. We can bring in our OBS, which are observation or chain files. We can bring in control points, and we can bring in an XYZ point file. Okay, the 2 files that we're going to work with today are the OBS and the XYZ. So I'm going to pick on the OBS. It says, all right, go find the file. All right, I'm still in the same folder that I was a few minutes ago, and this file here is a native EFB file. This isn't something we're creating, so I'm going to select it, pick Open, and it's going to load that OBS file directly into the EFB Desktop. So if I go down here and I highlight chains and expand it out, you'll see that I've got all the different chains that were collected out in the field. So they have things like, what's the chain name, what's the attribute, what zone is it in, basically, whether it's topo or drainage utilities, all right? All right, and then also all the points that make up that particular chain. So I've got data, so that looks good. So I go back to File. I'm going to go back to Import, and now I'm going to import the XYZ points. Okay. Again, I have a file that's an extension .xyz, and again, that's a native file to EFB. Okay. And now when I pick on any one of those points, you can see now that it gives me the point name. It tells me whether it's a curve or a point. It tells me the attribute for the DTM, and it also tells me the zone type, again, whether it's topo or drainage, utilities, or whatever. Okay. So now I brought in 2 pieces of data into this SDF file. Okay. Now what I have to do is to make it something that's going to be compatible either with the LandXML grouper or directly into Civil 3D, is that I've got to do a file export, and I'm going to export it out as a LandXML file. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that file in a folder where I'm going to put all my LandXML files. All right. And I'm going to use the name of the segment for that LandXML file. I'm going to hit Save. All right. And now I've got a LandXML file for segment B. Let's do this again. File, New. Okay. Let's go up, and now let's go into segment C. Okay. And let's create an SDF file for it. Let's hit Save. And it's the same process. Just do an import. First my OBS. Okay, that looks correct. I'm going to double check and make sure that I've got some chain data, which I do. And I'm going to do another import, XYZ points. And here's my XYZ file, again, which is under segment C. I'm going to pick on those control points, or pick on those points. All right, there's my point name. All right, the geometry, and this one's a point instead of a curve. There's my attributes. There's my northing and easting and elevation, or X, Y, and Z. Okay, so file, export to LandXML. All right, and again, I'm going to put it in this folder called EFB DOS files. Save it. Say yes. And now I'm done with the EFB Desktop. So again, I'm just using the EFB Desktop application to build this SDF file and to import the OBS and the XYZ files and then push them out as a LandXML. So I'm going to go ahead and close EFB Desktop. All right. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at what we've just done. So I'm going to open up this tool here from my FDOT 2016.C3D folder. I'm going to open up my visualizer tool. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say File, Open. Okay, and I'm going to open up this segment that ends in B. And so now you can see it's reading that LandXML file. It's displaying both the chains and the points. All right, if I look up here under CG Points, I can pick on any one of these points and right-click and say Center On, and it will center on that point, and it will then highlight that point. Okay, let me do another one. Right-click, Center On, and again, it just gives me a visual feedback is that that's the point that I've selected, and here's where it's located in the XML file. All right, let's go out and look at the chains, which they call plan features. So I'm going to pick on this chain here, right-click, say Zoom to, and what it's going to do is it's going to highlight that whole chain. All right? All right, let me pick on another one here. It's expanded out. All right? So now you can see that on that chain it tells me whether I have a point or a curve. So if I pick on the point, it should highlight the point. If I pick on the curve, you can see that it just walks right down that chain and shows me point and curve data. Okay. Now some of the other things that we can do inside of here, if this LandXML file included maybe a surface, I can actually take a look at the surface in this LandXML viewer as well. Okay. Now some of the tools that I have at the bottom here is I have this what looks like a mountain. This is like doing a zoom extension in AutoCAD. All right. I have one here called Zoom Dynamic that lets me just hold my left mouse button down and drag a red box, and it just basically zooms me to the area of interest. Okay. I have this one here that's called Zoom Recenter. Wherever I pick, that becomes the center of the screen. All right. I have a Zoom Out option. I have a Zoom In option. All right. I can move the screen to the left. I can move it to the right. I can move it up. I can move it down. So you can see that I'm just using this tool to go in and look at the LandXML file before I go to the next step, just kind of as a check and balance to make sure that I've got some valid data. All right, let's close that out. All right, the next thing that I'm going to open up is this tool here called the LandXML Grouper. Okay. Now, the LandXML Grouper is made up of a couple areas of interest. One is this thing called the group filters. Now, the group filters is looking for data in certain formats. So like if I'm looking for my TOPORD chains, it's going to be searching against all the chains that I bring in that LandXML file that match this code, and it's going to add it to that LandXML filter. Okay? Or TOPORD points. It's going to be looking for codes a certain way. All right, if I go down and look at my GDM chains, then you can see that it may be looking for those particular zones and maybe an attribute. All right, if I look at the GDTMRD points, it may be looking for a particular zone, you know, like topo or drainage, or right, or a particular attribute for ground. Okay, so my first step here is to do a file open, and I'm going to open up this segment called 4184391B. This is segment B. Okay, again, this is the file that came out from the LandXML out of the EFB Desktop. Okay. Now, if I go down here to the LandXML, if I pick on the first one here, it's showing me all the points. All right, so you can look and you can see you've got a point name, but you'll notice that there are no zones in here, and that's an important thing to understand when you're looking at your data. All right, knowing what you have before you apply these filters. Okay. All right. If I look at this one here, this is showing me all the chains. Now the chains do have the zone information in them. Okay. All right. And it has codes and it has attributes and it may even have a description. Okay. So what we're going to do first here is we're going to look at the TOPORD chains. Okay. So the TOPORD chain is basically set up to search on these codes. So if it finds this code and it's selected here, then it's going to add it to select it from that filter and add it down here to the LandXML output. Okay. Same thing with points. If I pick on points, it's searching for points based upon this code. So if it matches, it's going to add it to that filter. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight both of these by simply picking one of them, holding the shift key down, and picking the other one. I'm just doing a range. So I'm doing just the TOPORD chains. I right click and I'm going to pick on the option create a group. So what it's going to do now is it's going to take my filter and it's going to create this grouped output. So here's all the things that match that filter. Right? So here's my chains. So it matched it based upon the code and the attribute. And here's all the TOPORD points that it's bringing in. Okay. All right, let's take a look at my TOPORD, my GDTMRD chains. Okay. So it's going to be searching on zone and it's going to be searching on an attribute for ground. Okay. So remember, if we looked at chains, you can see that the chain data does have a zone in it. But if I look at the one for my points, okay, and I look at my points here, you'll see that I don't have a zone in here. If I leave these two checked, it will not return any data because it's looking for that. If it doesn't find it, it doesn't pick anything and it won't add any points to the group. So what I've got to do in this example is I need to uncheck those zones. Well, the problem is that they're grayed out. I can't pick on them. So what I have to do is I have to select on that filter, either right click and pick on the locked option or double click on that and it will unlock it. Now you can see that I can go in and uncheck those two zones, all right, because I don't have any zones to select. So I'm basically going to add all the points to that group by just looking at the attribute of ground. So you can see that I have a lot of attributes for these points for ground. Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and relock both of those. Okay. And do the same thing. Hold a shift key down, pick those two, right click, and create the group. All right. And I'm going to double check. So there's my chains and there's my points. So if I had not unchecked those two zones on the points, then I would have had nothing in the points. Okay. All right. Now, for the drainage and the utility, I'm just going to leave those alone. So I'm going to highlight those four filters, right click, and create the groups. And then from bridge down to existing utilities, right click, and say create those groups. So what I've done now is I've gone through and I've told the software to apply the filters to create the groups so that when I import this data into Civil 3D, I will have some specific groups for specific file types like my TOPORD or my GDTM or my topo, RW for right-of-way, okay, or for my drainage or for my utilities. Now the last step that I have to do here is file and save as, and I'm now going to save this as a LandXML file. Now you'll notice that it takes the name of the file that I brought in, and at the end of it, it adds the phrase grouped. All right, I'm going to put it in the same folder, and I'm going to replace because I already had one there. Now let's do the process again. We'll do it a little bit faster. So I'm going to do a file open. I'm going to pick on segment C. Now, since I didn't close the LandXML grouper out, it retains the settings. So if I look at my GDTMRD points, you'll see that those zones are unchecked. And the only thing I'm going to be searching on is by the attribute for the ground feature. All right, so I'm going to just pick on TOPORD, go all the way to the bottom of the list, holding my shift key down, right click, create the group. All right, so there's my chains for my TOPORD, there's my points for my TOPORD, there's my change for my GDTM, and there's the points that I'm going to use for my GDTM file. All right, so the last step is file, save as. Again, it's going to be segment C, grouped. All right, let's go ahead and close out LandXML grouper and not save the changes to the settings file. And I probably said save the changes. Okay, So now, let's go ahead and start up Civil 3D. So now what we have out there is we have 4 grouped LandXML files, okay, that we've run through the grouper. So now the first thing that we need to do when we get into Civil 3D is that we need to make sure that our tool space is active. If your tool space is not active or not being displayed, go to the Home tab, go to the Palettes panel, and if it's not shaded in blue, that means it's turned off. Pick on Tool Space, and now you'll see that your tool space comes up. And we're going to go to the Survey tab. Now, the first thing that we need to do is that we need to tell the software, when we create the survey database, what folder do we want the survey database stored in. So we go over here to the survey database, and we right-click, and we say Set the Working Folder. All right, so we're going to go to our Civil 3D project folder. We're going to go to our project that we're working in, and we're going to select on the folder called Survey. So that's where it's going to create a new folder for our survey database that we're going to create. Okay. All right, so the next step that we're going to do here is that we are going to right-click, and we are going to create a new local survey database. And we're just going to paste that name in that I just copied from that little text file, and we're going to call it 433.34301 _ State Road 57 _ EB. So I'm just telling it the name of the road, and I put EFB after it just so I know that I'm working with EFB data. Okay, So now, in the Survey tab, underneath Survey Databases, I have a new survey database that has been opened up. Before I start adding data, I need to check the database settings. So I'm going to select on that survey database, I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to say Edit the Survey Database Settings. Okay. So the first thing I need to set is, what is the coordinate zone for that database? So I pick on the box with the 3 dots, or the ellipse box. Okay, and then I can go in here and say, all right, slide down the list and say, USA, Florida, and then I can go to the available coordinate system, and the coordinate system on this one is going to be nat 83 north feet. So I can go down and pick nat 83 north feet, US foot. Okay, or if I know the zone, I can just simply go in and type in FL83-NF, and it automatically selects Florida and the north zone US foot. So either way, whatever way you want to do it is fine. Okay. Now, the next step is very important, especially when working with EFB data. You need to take your slider here and slide all the way down to the bottom, and you need to check under Extended Properties, create new definitions automatically, and display warnings for missing required parameters. Remember when I showed you when we were in the EFB, and we looked at, things like, what zone something was in, or what was an attribute, whether it was a ground or whether it was a feature. If we don't check this information doesn't come in. And if we need to build a new custom point group and we want to do it by a query, we have to have that data or it won't show up. So this is why we must check these 2 boxes. All right? So now we hit OK. So now, I don't care at this point what drawing I'm working in, because all the data that I'm bringing in is going directly into the survey database. Has nothing to do with the drawing at this point yet. Okay? Now, to import data into the survey database, I have a number of different ways that I can do this. I could go to the Home tab under the Create Ground Data panel, and I can pick on Import Survey Data. I can go to the Insert tab, right? And I can pick under the Import panel, Import Survey Data. I can right-click on the survey database and go down to Import Survey Data. Or I can pick on Import Events and right-click and say Import Survey Data. All 4 of them get you to this dialog. All right, so you pick whichever one that you want to use. All right. If I had not gone in and checked my survey database settings, I could do it at this time. So if you pick on Edit Survey Database Settings, you'll see that it still remembers the coordinate system that I've set up, and it still has the extended properties checked. Okay, so we're going to hit Next. So it says, okay, specify the data source type and select the data. So what is the source data? Where is it coming from? All right, if I pick the down arrow, it can come from a field book, LandXML, an ASCII point file, or points from a drawing. All right, we're going to use the LandXML file. Where's that file located? So we pick on the folder icon. Okay. All right, I'm going to go to my project folder, and I'm going to go to the folder that I saved away called EFB DOS files, and I'm going to pick on the file called group because this is what we want to bring in. This file was the file that came directly out of EFB Desktop. So I'm going to pick on this file, and I'm going to hit open. I'm going to hit next. All right, I don't have to do this next step here, but I'm a creature of habit. So I'm going to go ahead and tell it what is the coordinate system of the data that I'm bringing in. Because if the coordinate system of the file coming in is different, it will do a coordinate transformation. Okay. Another thing that I want to check is make sure that when it's bringing the data in, that it's not drawing any line work on the screen, it's not bringing in any figure objects, nor is it bringing in any survey points. I just want to load the data into the survey database. So I hit finish, and away I go. So what I have here is I have figure groups. These figure groups are those groups that we built in the LandXML grouper. Remember the TOPORD chain? All right, there's all the TOPORD chains. Okay, the GDTMRD chains. There they are. Now, we also have survey point groups. So here's the GDM points. Here's the TOPORD points that we have. Now, here's the issue when we work with EFB data. When I go to bring in the next grouped LandXML file, it will automatically merge that group of chains in with the existing chain group that's already in the survey database. But on the point files, it doesn't do that. All right. So what it will do is, if it finds some more GDTM points in that new LandXML group file, it's going to create one here called GDM, points.1 or points.2 or points.3. If you want to, what you can do is before you bring in the next group of data, you can select it, right-click, go to Properties, and what you can do is you can go in and basically tell it, what group those points were part of. All right. So I have to hit OK twice. Okay. Is that required? No. Should you do it? Probably, because in Civil 3D it's all about data organization. All right. And so if you don't have things organized and know what the data is, sometimes it makes it hard to work with. You have to figure out what you have. All right. So again, this is just an extra step that I'm doing, and I'm doing it just on the point groups, not on the figures. Okay. So let's go up here. Right. Let's bring in the next one. All right, next. Okay, this one's going to be the C-group file. All right, again, creature of habit, FL83-NF. Hit OK. Double check and make sure they're not checked. They're not. Now, it's found a duplicate point, and that's quite common with EFB data. Sometimes they set up on the same points from one segment to the next. And so when you get this, just simply say ignore all. And your panoramic viewer here for the event viewer is going to tell you what's happened here. So I'm going to clear those out. Okay. Again, survey point group. See how now I have a new one called GDTM points, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go to the properties, _C. And for my TOPORD points, _C there. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and do another one. Okay, let's do the segment D grouped. All right, FL83-NF. And again, ignore all. And again, I typically, whenever I get events in my event viewer, I'll read them and then I'll clear them out. All right, one more we have to do. So let's go ahead down here into my points. All right, they didn't bring any GDM points in this one, but it did bring in some TOPORD points. So we just rename it _D. Okay, and let's do the last one. So this was going to be segment E grouped. And again, one more time, FL83-NF. And ignore all. And clear those events out. Okay, so we'll right click on this one. This one's going to be GDM points underscore E. Okay, and then my TOPORD points, same thing here, underscore E. And again, this is not something that you have to do, naming these, but it makes it a lot easier because you can see now, you'll see like under the ROW control points. So point 1, point 2, point 3. So I don't know, which group they came out of. I'm assuming that, this one is, A, this one was, or this one's B, this one's C, this one's, D, this one's E. Okay? All right, so now I've got the data in my survey database. So now what I need to do is I need to go out and go to the FDOT tab, and I need to create my first file. So I need to make sure that first I'm in the right project. All right, I go to the file group called Survey Design File, and I'm going to create this file called the Survey Development Model. And I'm going to go ahead and assign the coordinate system to it. Okay, and I'm going to hit Create and open the file. Now, when you do this, you might get an error message that comes up on the screen that basically says that something doesn't match your data shortcut. So if you haven't got your data shortcut path already set up before you do this, then you're going to get an error, and just basically it's just telling you, hey, this doesn't match up, just letting you know, and you need to go back and set your data shortcuts up. All right? So let's hit close. Let's go ahead and set the scale of the drawing at 1 to 40. Okay? Now, why do we use the SURVRD file? The SURVRD file is a file that we do use for work in progress. This is where we do all our editing in the data that we're bringing in from the survey database, whether it's creating the TOPORD data, whether it's trying to create a new surface from data that's coming in from the survey database. So this is what we use the SURVRD file. Is it a deliverable or a true deliverable? Some districts ask you to deliver it. Other districts don't ask you to deliver it. Think of this file as like we did back in college where, when we took an exam, they said, you need to basically show your work. That's what this file really is. It's just showing what we've done. Okay? So the first thing we're going to do now is we're going to go into our figure groups. And we're going to pick on the figure group called TOPORD chains. And we're going to right click and we're going to insert those into the drawing. So now, from the survey database, we now have told it from the LandXML grouper, we're now brought in all the TOPORD chains, everything that matched up to those codes. So the first thing we need to do is we need to start looking in this file and seeing if we have any issues. Another thing that we probably need to do is we need to go down and go ahead and bring in our TOPORD points. Okay? So we've got our TOPORD points. All right? So we're going to right click on it and insert those into the drawing. All right? And you can see now as I bring those points in, you'll see they're being displayed with both a symbol and a label. And the way that works is that on our settings tab, if we go under points and under description keys, what it's doing is it's matching up a code from that point, and if it matches, it's applying a particular point style and applying a particular point label on that point. That's how this is being automatically processed. This description key set is part of the template. Okay. The other thing that is happening is that when we bring in the data, all right, we have these things called a figure prefix database. If I right click on that, so again, it's matching a code. It says the code matches. I want you to put it on this particular layer, and I want to apply a particular style, which is part of this template. So that's how the line work is coming in on the proper layers. Okay, so that's how all this is coming to pass. So if I zoom in here and take a look at this data that I brought in, and I hover over this, it tells me that that is a driveway. Well, I don't remember out in the field collecting this data and finding something that looks like a tennis ball with a nose on it. So I know that I've got an issue. So I'm going to hit my escape key once so I don't have anything selected. All right, because we're working in Civil 3D, when I pick on one of these Civil 3D objects, the ribbon will change and it tells me, okay, you've selected a survey figure, so I'm going to edit my survey figure properties. All right, and I'm going to go down here and look and see what's going on. So down here, what I have, okay, is I have 4 pieces of geometry. I'm going to pick on the first one. I'm going to change that from a curve to a point. and I'm just going to walk right down the list because it was just coded incorrectly when it came in. Okay, I hit apply, hit OK, hit escape, and now I fixed that issue. Same issue here, I've got a problem. All right, survey figure properties. Okay, I'm going to change this from a curve to a point. Hit apply and hit OK. So what I have to do is I've simply got to go through this data that I brought in from the survey database and make any edits that are required. All right, I'm going to go down here and look at this, pick on this one, and this is a fence. Well, that fence doesn't have a curve in it. Same thing, select it, survey figure properties, change that curve to a point. Hit apply, hit OK. Okay. Now, I've got an issue right here where I had, segment B, segment C, segment D, and segment E. Well, when they set up to build this segment, they didn't use the same point to start that segment from. So they picked a different starting point. So I've got this gap in here, and I've got to fill the gap. So what I do is I pick on one of these survey figures. I go to the survey figure property. And what I'm going to do here is I go down in this area right in here. I'm going to pick on the very first point name. And you can see that when I pick on it, it gives me a glyph that says this is where you're at. So as I pick on different names, right, it moves me up. So I'm going to pick on the first one. And then there's an option up here right above it called Insert a Vertex before the selected vertex. So I'm going to pick on it. And now it adds a blank line. Now, in order to be able to go in and do any editing, because right now on my screen, I can't zoom or pan, all right? All I can do is pick on this little icon here. Now it allows me to zoom and pan. So I'm going to zoom up, zoom in, and I'm going to pick on this line right here. And what it's going to do is it's going to extract out of that the name of that point and also pick up the northing, the easting, and the elevation information. I'm going to hit apply. I'm going to hit OK, hit escape, and now I've added that segment. Now, these are still two individual segments, okay? But I've now added a new vertex to basically tie it back into this point. Let's do it one more time, and we'll do this segment here. We'll select it, survey figure properties, right? I'm going to add a new vertex, pick on the icon, pan up, zoom in, select the endpoint, okay, hit apply, hit OK, hit escape. Now, all of the edits that I've been doing are being pushed back to the survey database. So I'm editing it graphically on the screen, but updating the survey database. Okay. All right, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to work with my surface data. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is I'm still in the SURVRD file. Okay, I'm going to go into my figure groups and I'm going to go down to my GDTMRD chains. Now I have a decision to make here. Do I want to right click and insert those directly into the drawing and then go in and build a surface and then go in and say I want to add break lines and then pick all those chains that I brought in? Okay, or do I just want to use those as break lines and create the surface on the fly? Well, that's the more efficient way to do it. So I'm going to right click on create break lines. Now on the create break lines dialog box, it says select the surface. There's no surface to find. So I'm going to tell it by picking on the icon right here to create a new surface. All right, I'm going to call this one existing dash State Road 57. And I'm going to display it with a style of triangles 1-to-1 existing green. Okay. So now I'm saying apply all these break lines to this surface. So all I do now is I hit OK. Now it comes up and says, so do you want to give the break lines a name, this group of break lines? Now we'll leave it alone. But what type of break lines are they? Are they standard proximity walls? Right? They're standard break lines because they have elevation information. Okay. I'm going to hit OK. All right, and it comes up and oh no, got an error. And the error basically tells me that one of my break lines has crossed another break line. All right, it's a warning. All right, we can fix that. So let's go to action and clear all events. Okay. Now, if I go to the Prospector tab and I look under point groups, you'll see that it brought in those 3 point groups for the TOPORD points. You will also notice that the point group called No Display has the golden shield. And the reason why it has the shield is the group was pre-built in the template, and that when I brought the data in, it doesn't automatically update. So I just simply right-click on it and say Update, and now all the points have been loaded, in for the All Points point group have been loaded into the No Display. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my Survey tab, and I'm going to go into my Survey point group, and I'm going to pick on my GDTMRD points E, and I'm going to insert those into the drawing. My group that ends in B, insert those into the drawing, and my group that ends C, and insert that point group into the drawing. Okay. And if I zoom in and select on one of those points and go to Survey point groups, you'll see that it tells me the point group name, all right? But most importantly, it also brought in that LandXML extended data. Remember when we checked the 2 boxes under the survey database settings? That's why this data came in. Okay. All right, now I have brought the point groups in. All right, so to prove it, if I go to the Prospector, you'll see now that I have those 3 point groups. But the point groups have not been applied to my surface yet, all right? Because I want to add some additional point data to, define more information to my surface. So I go down to my surface, expand out my existing surface, expand out my definition, and go down to point groups and right-click and say Add. All right, so I'm going to select these 3 point groups, okay? And I'm going to apply it, and I'm going to hit OK. And you'll see how the surface automatically updated with this information. Now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and save my SURVRD file, because what I want to do is I want to do my first check on my surface. Okay, so I'm going to select the surface on the screen. I also could just select it by going to my surface and right-clicking and saying Select as well. And then up here in my ribbon under the General Tools, I could pick Object Viewer, or I can right-click and pick Object Viewer. And what I'm looking for is the dreaded Christmas tree, which is usually on the top of the surface, or a hole, which may be a point that may be extending down below the surface. So what I'm looking for is blown shots. All right, everything looks pretty good. So I'm going to close that out. Okay. Now remember the problem that we had when we created the surface where we had the crossing break line? To fix that, I'm going to go over to my Prospector tab, go to my surface, right-click, and go to Surface Properties. I'm going to go to the Definition tab, and I'm going to expand out my definition options called Build. And in there, I have an option called Allow Crossing Break Lines. I'm going to change it by selecting it from No to Yes. And I'm going to tell it that I have 3 options here. Use the first break line elevation, use the last break line elevation, or use an average. For this example, I'm going to use the last break line elevation. Now, when I hit Apply, I'm making a change to the surface. So it's going to tell me, do you want to rebuild the surface? Yes, I do. So I'm going to pick Rebuild the Surface. Now you'll notice I no longer have a warning. It just simply says a break line crossed, right, at that location. All right, so we now know that we've fixed that problem. Okay, let's go ahead and clear that event and close that out. All right, I'm going to save the file one more time. So now, I've done my edits. I may want to go in and make a change, down in this area here. Maybe I don't need these lines in here, so I could pick on the surface, and I could go in here and say Edit the Surface, and I could say Delete a line. I can use my function my shortcut called F for fence, and I'm just going to go in here and pick 2 points and clean that corner up, and maybe pan up here. And what happens is a lot of times when you're adding these points, the software is trying to triangulate across points that we don't need to be triangulated. Okay, so I'm going to do a fence again and maybe come into here and maybe come back out. All right, and that looks pretty good. All right, so now my surface is in pretty good shape. So one of the requirements that when we're working, with survey data with the FDOT is that we're required to create a clean surface in the GDTMRD file. And to do that, we right-click on the existing surface here, and we say export it to LandXML. So we're going to tell it that we want to export this existing State Road 57 surface. Okay, we're going to put it in the survey folder underneath our current project. So I'm just going to go down here and pick under survey. Okay, I'm going to give this a name so it makes it easier for me to remember what this is. So it say, all right, this is coming out of the SURVRD file. I'm going to call this one State Road 57 existing, and it's just a name. Okay, hit save. Okay, so now I've used my SURVRD file to clean up my TOPORD data. Okay, I've used it to insert and create a new surface called, existing, and I've done some cleanup, and now I've pushed it out as a LandXML file. So now I'm ready to start creating those two deliverables. So I'm going to pick on FDOT, tab in my ribbon, create a file. Double check my project, make sure that I'm in the right file group, and I'm going to start out by creating the one called Topo Existing. So it's TOPORD01. I'm going to set the coordinate system. I'm going to create the file. And since I'm already in the Create File dialog box, let's go ahead and create the digital train model. All right, now you'll notice that it's still, because that file didn't exist in that folder yet, it remembered the coordinate system because I hadn't gotten out of the Create File dialog, so I'm going to create and open that file. All right. So now I'm going to go up here to my File tabs and make the TOPORD file the current file. Okay, so I'm going to go to my survey database. Okay, and we're just going to repeat this process. We're going to go to Survey Figure Groups. We're going to pick on the one called TOPORD Chains. We're going to right-click, and we're going to say Insert those into the drawing. Remember all the edits that we did up in this area here? Remember, we got rid of the tennis ball with the nose. We fixed the curve around there, and we fixed this one here, and then we did our edits. Let's go ahead and change the scale of the drawing to 1:40. All right, and here's the edits we did in here. Okay, let's go ahead now to our survey points, all right, and let's go ahead and bring in our TOPORD. So right-click, insert it in the drawing, and I'm just going to do this 4 times. Okay, so there we go. We now have a completed TOPORD file from data from the survey database that started out its life as electronic fieldbook data collected out in the field. Okay, we switch over to the file called GDTMRD 01. Okay, now we're not going to bring the data in from the survey database. We're going to go up here to the Insert tab and say Import LandXML. Here's the LandXML file that we pushed out from the SURVRD drawing. Okay, this is going to be the clean, edited surface. So we select it, we hit Open. There's our surface that we're bringing in, and there's all our information about the surface. We hit OK, and there's the surface. Now, by default, the application applies a particular style. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the Prospector tab. We're going to select on our surface. We're going to right-click, go to Surface Properties, and we're going to change the style of how the surface is being displayed. Okay, so triangles 1:1, existing green. There we go. Let's save the drawing, and let's just simply select it, go to the Object Viewer, and take a quick look at it. And there we go. You'll see that nice, clean, pristine file. Looks really good. Okay, so in the last 50 minutes or so, we have worked with a lot of different data. Now, the one thing that I want to do before I finish up here is let me minimize my Civil 3D application. Let me open up that visualizer tool, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to open up that surface, that LandXML file that I did. Let me go to my survey folder. All right. And you can see that I've got a number of different things that I can turn on or off. All right. All right. If I zoom in, you can see now that, here's the surface that we actually pushed out as a LandXML file. So again, I can use this LandXML viewer to view a surface. And again, there's just, different ways that we can view, the file. So it looks like it's basically showing the slope arrows, which are the vectors, okay? Or I could fill the triangles in with different types of fills that they've applied into there. So this is almost like doing an analysis in Civil 3D. So maybe I have a spectrum or an elevation or a slope, all right, or a grayscale. All right, so I just wanted to show you that. All right. So today we covered how to use the EFB Desktop to create an SDF file, to import the OBS and the XYZ files from the data collected out in the field using EFB to LandXML. We then looked at that LandXML file in the LandXML Visualizer tool. We then opened up the LandXML Grouper tool and we imported all 4 of those segments, all right, and we used the filters to create the groups, the required groups. We then opened up Civil 3D. We went through the process of how do you locate where your survey database is going. We then created a survey database, and we edited that survey database so that we told it the coordinate system, and then we also told it to also bring in that extended LandXML data. Okay. We then imported those 4 segments from the EFB grouped that we came out of the grouper. Okay. I showed you the little trick that how when you're bringing in the group LandXML data from EFB into the survey database, that it will merge the survey figures, but it won't merge the survey point groups. So I showed you how to rename those if you want to. All right. We then created the SURVRD file that we then pushed in the TOPORD survey figures and the TOPORD points. I showed you how the line work is created by that figure prefix database, and also how the points are connected on the screen by what point style is displayed and what point label style is displayed. We then went in and did some editing of those survey figures and showed you how that when you make the edits, they go directly back to the survey database. Okay. All right. We looked at point groups. Okay. All right. Then we created 2 model files for the deliverables, the TOPORD file and the GDTM. Okay. So we then use, we use that process of going back to the survey database and bringing in all the associated groups, whether it's the survey figures or the point groups for the TOPORD. And then for the GDTM, we took and imported a clean LandXML file that we actually had created and edited from the SURVRD file. So that's the process that you would use when you're working and trying to create your survey deliverables. Now, this is just a couple of the survey deliverables required, all right? But all that data is coming out of that survey database, whether it's the utility file, whether it's the drainage file, all that information is in the group. And it's the same process that we did with the TOPORD. Okay? So, in saying that, thank you for attending today's webinar. Okay, so if you have any additional questions, you can contact me at CAD Desk Consulting Resources, and you can email me at dmm@caddesk.com. Randy, back to you.
Thanks, Doug. Have one question. Can you just show quickly where the EFB Desktop is one more time?
Sure. Let me hit escape here. So the EFB Desktop is basically when you install it, it's this icon right here. So when you double click on it, this is the EFB Desktop. Now that's where it is on the screen. If you want to find where it's located so that you can download it, let me go back into here. You will find that. All right. Again, just go to Google and do a search on FDOT EFB Desktop 3.2. All right, download page, and this is. Whoops, I'm sorry. And this is the link where you would download it, and this is the file that you download. And again, remember, there is, on some machines, there is an issue where you have to download 1 or 2, keeps wanting to do 1 or 2 files directly from Microsoft to fix a problem. I did have to do it on my machine, but not everybody has to do that. So I believe it's in the README file or the help file for FB that tells you if you have that problem, where to go and what to look for.